Welcome, welcome, baby. Welcome to the Gump Report. You never know what you're going to get. Before I get started, thank you for anyone who saw my AEW review. It was on a Saturday night. Very few people are going to watch it. And I was tired and still recovering from the COVID-19 vaccine. It was a horrible combination. I didn't expect that many people to see the video, and I'm glad anybody saw it. So, thank you. I'm feeling a lot better today, and I'm interested in doing a Gump report, and we got a few of them here. The first one is how stupid WWE is. Here, let's put an example. You already saw the picture of the woman on this thumbnail. You probably already know about her, because this ain't new. This has been around for a few days easily. WWE hired a comedy writer who knows nothing of wrestling. Zero. She was not required. And she went on to some podcast or some show and said it was not required. WWE is so fucking stupid. Not because they didn't tell her to keep her mouth shut. But this is because WWE keeps doing these types of things. Look, if you've known the WWE for years, you've known Stephanie McMahon in the mid-2000s went and hired television writers. Let me say that again. Stephanie McMahon went and hired television writers to write for wrestling. Wrestling, guys. You, who is a wrestling fan, you know people who write for wrestling are people who have been in the industry for years. ROH usually use actual writers that have been working in wrestling for years. Impact Wrestling, TNA, they've done ROH. New Japan Pro Wrestling, All Japan Pro Wrestling, AAA. People who have been in the wrestling business who usually will write for wrestling. That's how it is. That's how it always was. Until the mid-2000s to near 2010 when Stephanie went and decided we need to change it up. We want to make something special. I think we get television writers to come in and write for wrestling who generally don't know about writing for wrestling. They know how to write for a comedy maybe. They know how to write for an action show. They know how to write for maybe sci-fi or drama or whatever was required by the network that needed to write for a show. And they came in. Many didn't get anywhere. Others did. That's how it really goes. There are some who did transition into figuring out how to write for wrestling because they probably took their due diligence, they watched the product, and they got used to the wrestlers and learned. Others did not, and they're probably still there. Understand, a lot of layoffs happened over the years since that happened, but there's still writers that are probably from that original batch and extra batch that was brought in that know nothing of wrestling at the time and probably still don't know a lot about wrestling even if they've been there for a few years. Here's another person. Again, they bring someone in who have absolutely no knowledge of wrestling. But here's the difference. This woman went and said it publicly, how it's required by the WWE to bring in a writer. Now, the WWE has never told anyone, hey, don't say what's going on in the business. Pretty much. Now, when it comes to the wrestlers, of course, there's certain rules they follow because Vince makes sure of it. But the writers are a little bit different. At least until after this, because I'm sure they're going to be changing that mess up. Because she went and exposed the WWE so badly. Not because she did it on purpose. Understand, this woman that you've seen in the thumbnail, I'm not blaming her. I don't blame any of the writers that was brought in by Stephanie McMahon. They wrote shit. And we had to taste it. They knew nothing of wrestling. And they were told to write to try and take aspects of television shows, or maybe comedy from television, or an action from television, or sci-fi, or whatever they thought could be helpful. Horror, the most stupidest skits you can think of, maybe from SNL. Who knows what type of writers came into WWE at the time back when Stephanie looked for them. You can't blame them when they came in. They went and tried to get a job. And they did the best they could, counting on if they had the due diligence to say, okay, I'm in this business now. I better start learning about it. This woman knows nothing about it. She was hired. So she has to learn if she's kept. She has to learn what it takes to make a wrestling storyline. What makes a good skit for wrestling? What makes good for a women wrestler or for a man wrestler or for both of them working together? She's going to have to learn it if she stays in the business after this situation. But this shows how stupid WWE is. Because when it comes down to it, there's really nothing wrong hiring people from other venues, other genres to help your business. There's nothing wrong with it. And I'm making this clear to anyone. If AEW does it, or Impact, or ROH, or even New Japan, there's nothing wrong with hiring writers out of the genre that you work in. But, and I want to make it clear, but instead of using them as consultants to your current writers, because this is what caused this mess back in the late 2000s, like 2008, 9, and 10, all the way up into 2021, because you guys remember the writing for WWE was atrociously bad, and that was because of the writers they hired. They thought the writers would improve their shows, and next to that, Vince didn't want to listen that the writers were not good for the shows as they were. They weren't working properly. I think it was that they didn't pair real wrestling writers with these writers. They just got rid of a lot of the old writers, or a lot of the old writers that were wrestling writers retired or quit or was fired. And instead of what writers they had left to pair up with these people, because I'm sure they already done it, but they brought in a lot of outside writers. And they probably didn't have enough real wrestling writers to help them. And worse yet, Vince didn't want them to learn. Now, I'm sure people will say, you don't know that. Think about it for a minute, guys. If Vince wanted them to really understand the wrestling business, you would not bring in writers, and then all of a sudden you bring in a ton of writers, and the product's writing went from here to roughly around here in the late 2000s into the 2010, and then took a damn nosedive. Flat out. It did. And people were complaining when they were like 5 million in the network. Remember, when they were still doing cable network, and they still had popularity in the Nielsen ratings of at least a 4 or 3 or 5. That means they had 4 million, 5 million, near 5.5 million, 4.5 million people watching. When they were still like this, the writing wasn't great, but it was still here. When those writers came in, the writing took a freaking nosedive. We all know it. We all remember it. That's because Vince used those writers primarily. So you cannot say that he didn't listen to, that I'm not understanding, that he didn't allow the regular writers to work with the other ones. They didn't. He drew on the people from the outside primarily. Yeah, there might have still been some real wrestling writers left on his staff and still there, but it didn't make a difference. He wanted outside stuff more than inside. Flat out. And this is where we are now today with WWE and their writing team. Their writing team does not either know wrestling, at least when they came in, or didn't care about wrestling. They only cared about a job. And this woman that came in, I don't even know her name, is not the point. Whatever her political beliefs are, whatever her religious beliefs are, whatever, if she believes the sky is red, blue, or green, doesn't matter. She knows nothing of wrestling, and she wasn't required to know nothing of wrestling. And the question is going to be, is she going to be required to even care about how wrestling works? They just want her to write funny skits or have funny skits that take wrestling elements. Because that's what this is going to come down to, guys. Is this woman going to be hired if she keeps staying hired? Because after this incident, who knows? Will she write skits that are just funny skits for comedy? And then they just take it and they throw it onto somebody? Or they're going to put her aside if they're smart, because I don't think they are. They're going to take this woman aside and spend the next couple of months letting her learn what wrestling is and what type of comedy is required in wrestling so she could actually craft good types of comedic actions that are wrestling based. Because when it comes down to, and I'm saying this to you right now, this woman, I do not believe they're going to have her stay out of writing for the writing team. They're going to just bring her in. She's just going to write comedy, and they're just going to throw it at the wrestlers and see what sticks. That is how stupid Kevin Dunn, Bruce Pritchard, Vince, Stephanie, that's how stupid they are. Because that is what's going to happen. I will be surprised. I will be surprised if she comes in, they do not use her at first, and they let her sit down with actual wrestling writers, actual wrestlers, because I know they'll sit them down. She'll sit with wrestlers. She's going to interact with them, fine, but she's not going to have the opportunity. I'm about to say Apple. You never know what you're going to get. There's no way she's just going to have a couple of months to really soak in where she is. They're going to make her write immediately. And she's going to be in front of wrestling. She's going to be in front of wrestlers. And she's going to be expected to write skits to these wrestlers that she doesn't even know. She doesn't understand the context of their characters or of their storylines or anything. They're just going to make her write funny skits. They'll give her maybe a little bit of input if she's lucky. And you're going to go with stupid comedy that is meant for maybe SNL. For maybe one of the current shows that are out there that probably is funny or maybe not. That is what you're going to get. And the product is going to suffer greatly more in what it is. This is why I don't watch wrestling from WWE often at all. The only thing I do are the pay-per-views. And even that is a chore, guys. I still love the Usos. I love how they're doing Roman Reigns. I love how Paul Heyman's working. You know why? Because Paul Heyman is a wrestler. A writer for wrestling. It's someone who understands how wrestling is. He's taking care of Brock Lesnar. He's taking care of Roman Reigns. He's taking care of the Usos. When he was going to run Raw, he understood what was needed. And guess who wanted to get rid of him? Someone who would not benefit. Bruce. You can say a lot with brother love. I love you. But when it comes down to it, he's a businessman. And he's going to do whatever he can to keep his control over the main part of the product. So he managed to get Paul removed as the executive of that. And now is relegated to SmackDown, working with only Roman Reigns and the Usos. And guess what? Roman Reigns looks great. The Usos are interesting and compelling. That shows the stark difference of the camps that are currently... Let me put it like this. There are two camps in WWE. I mean, there are very multiple factions within WWE. This, in my humble perspective, there are several factions in WWE. Several. But the main two camps you got, the main two camps are two. You have Vince and how the old system works and how he clearly wants things done. And the majority of the people there follow his lead and do what he wants, either because they're scared to lose their job, or they agree with him, or they love him and will not go against him. Then you got the other camp. That is the people who have been giving the leaks to Dave Meltzer and everybody else. You got the people who have been trying their hardest, like a Nikki Cross, trying to pitch new things. You got like the people with Roman Reigns, the Usos, and Triple H himself, at least what little he can do on NXT, because remember, Vince's influence now NXT. It's not because they're on USA that the product still sucks. It's because Vince has some say in there. No matter what anyone says there right now, no matter if Paul tells you straight to your face, he's not doing anything there. Yes, he is. To some extent, he has got some level of influence. That is the other side of the coin. And there are always factions in each one who's trying to take advantage of the situation. In Vince's faction, Bruce Pritchard's doing everything he can to get whatever he wants and to keep as much control as possible. And several other people trying to get advantage. There's no way it's not happening. On this side, where people are trying to be creative using what they know right now that people really do want, there are people trying to take advantage. People are trying to control the situation and trying to get an advantage that is also screwing over fans as well as wrestlers. And there's some that are benefiting that are not screwing anybody over, like the Usos and Roman Reigns. There's some level there. But there's also the same on both sides. Both sides have factions. Both sides have people trying to take advantage of each other. I don't need to know that, neither do you, but you know it's there. There are people that are from the top down that are all taking some advantage, that are either being screwed, taking advantage of others, or taking advantage of when they're given an opportunity and trying honestly to do the right thing. On Vince's side, there's some that are trying, and on the other side, they're trying. And either they're failing or succeeding in some minor or major way. When it comes down to it, you're about to see a new comedy action in the WWE that's going to probably suck. That's the truth. But this is just my point of view. And I hope you enjoyed this Gump Report. Give me a comment below. And I am going to do another one right after this. Hopefully you're going to like it. It will be hopefully 2 for this week. Maybe 3. Because I kind of want to make up for what happened last week. Not being able to see Impact. The AEW review really pissed me off because I was tired and grumpy. And maybe I don't think anybody liked what I said with Dante Martin, even though they didn't comment on it. Maybe people didn't really like it. That's just me. You guys tell me below. Peace.